Guru Nation, thank you so much for watching. You see my lovely co-host to
Lovely.
my left, Chris Sauber with a Def Leopard shirt on. Nice, man. And the Dodger hat on. Dodgers lost a terrible game last night. I actually watched an entire baseball game with my father-in-law.
Wow.
Yeah, haven't done that in a while. So, anyways, this is not about baseball, but Chris is on because he's a site owner. We just jumped off of a Latinos in Clinical Research um, co-founders Zoom, and
hmm
one of the co-founders, another site owner, shared this article. So I'm going to share the screen. I've already looked on LinkedIn for these people. They're not on there. At least the first two people are not on LinkedIn, and not surprisingly either. Because if you're going to do dirt, as you know by now what the title's about. So here's what not to do if you own a site, guys, or work at a site. All right, let's start with that. So, Chris, two Florida medical study coordinators plead guilty in connection with scheme to falsify clinical trial data. So, we always talk about how the FDA holds the PI responsible. Well, that doesn't mean the coordinators off the hook if they're involved, because the Department of Justice will be the one to decide. And the way they framed it, go
So,
ahead, Chris.
so I was just going to say, so to clarify those 2 points, right?
Yeah,
So, FDA, yes, primarily is just going to hold the PI to blame. But when you're talking criminal, that's an entirely different field, right? This is not the FDA and whether or not this drug is going to be approved, and if there's problems, who's to be blamed, right?
right.
When we're talking criminal, that's something entirely different than the FDA. And criminal, well, you can't charge a crime to somebody else they didn't commit, right? So when it comes to criminal, it's whoever committed the crime. So we're talking
Right.
DOJ here, not
Yeah.
FDA.
Right. Well, we're talking both because most people in our industry, they think, okay, the ultimate regulators, the FDA, this is true. But if you're doing things you're not supposed to be doing, like, I don't know,
Illegal
committing
things,
fraud, and
illegal
I don't
things.
know, jeopardizing public safety, like, this is a lot more serious than some people think. Look what the Assistant Attorney General Brian M. Boyton said. All right. He's the head of the Justice Department's Civil Division. Clinical trials are the foundation of the drug approval process. The Justice Department will continue to work with its law enforcement partners to prosecute those who falsify clinical trial data for personal profit. The public relies on the accuracy of clinical trial data, said U.S. Attorney Juan Antonio Gonzalez. We need him on the LICR podcast too, for the Southern District of Florida. Falsifying clinical data endangers the safety of consumers and violates the public's trust. It is a serious crime that will continue to vigorously prosecute. All things said, so there are the two coordinators, Anile Rico, Dalen Diaz from TELUS Clinical Research, and Daniel Tejeda, Eduardo Navarro, Nadia Verona, sentenced to 30 months in prison, 46 months in prison, and 30 months in prison, respectively, for their roles. The trial
Brutal.
is set for, yeah, the trial is set for September 27th in the case of the other three defendants, the PI, Fidelis Font, so that might be like the owner, and all charged by indictment.
So, we often tell clients or prospective clients or prospective investigators that you're not risking your license in any way, right? Getting involved in clinical research.
Right.
Well, here's where you are risking your license, right? But this isn't clinical research. This is fraud.
Fraud.
And if this investigator goes to prison, well, he's going to lose his medical license. So,
But it's not just the investigator. That's all these people, like
no,
CRCs.
I understand that. I'm just saying when we discuss,
Mm-hmm.
problems that could arise with medical licenses and doing research, it's really none, so long as you follow the protocol, right?
Yeah. So as part of so here's back to the two coordinators, okay? As part of their plea agreements, they admitted that they agreed with orders to defraud clients paying for clinical trial work intended to evaluate treatments for opioid dependency, irritable bowel syndrome, diabetic neuropathy. They admitted they falsified data to make it appear as though subjects were participating in the trials when in truth they were not. So they just got names, maybe pre-screened, maybe they didn't even do that. And
Hmm.
then they must have got the blood from somebody,
From each other.
from each other, but ultimately, like blood sample, even urine sample, it can't be like there are ways to identify them, and there's even ways to identify like differences between visits. Like, I mean, it's one of the key assessments in any trial is
Sure, it's
blood work.
one of the safety assessments.
Hmm. So these
So
people don't think it through, or they just think that they can just hide in the midst of all the data. They're just one of maybe 50 sites, so we can just make up
right.
some patients. Generally, guys, well, not generally, always making up patients is a very bad idea.
So, and this isn't, I mean, while this isn't normal, I wouldn't say it's abnormal either. There was a physician in Riverside not too many years ago that I'm sure you recall the story. I think it was Riverside that was making up patients and something like $3 million worth of data. Right, he was paid like $3 million, and
Mm-hmm.
how he got caught was probably similar to how these people at TELUS got caught. They were using the same two people for all the medical assessments, labs, EKGs. So CRA caught that everything was the same,
Wow.
right?
Not to
So,
mention the PK, like if they do pharmacokinetics, they
yeah,
look at how the drugs absorb by the body,
yeah.
and everyone processes drugs differently in their body. So if you have the same exact data repeating
Hmm.
over and over, uh,
Looks a little
you
odd.
got,
Something
you
a
got
little
a
odd.
problem.
What?
It's unbelievable, man. But we started off that Zoom, and you were saying you're not surprised, or that it's not unbelievable. Like,
Yeah.
and we differ on that because how is it
So
not unbelievable?
I think when there's monetary gain in any industry, you're going to have problems in terms of, especially in an industry where you would like everything to be 100% genuine, right?
Hmm.
When there's a financial gain, you're giving incentive to cut corners, to do whatever's necessary to make that dollar. And if you want to remove that incentive, then you obviously have to remove the monetary gain. But there would be no research if there was nothing to be made, right? Doctors need to be paid for their time. Patients even need to be paid for their time.
Yeah.
Um, and if you remove all those financial gains, then you're going to make research impossible.
Well, there's
So,
some people on TikTok now that I'm on TikTok. I get some new haters. So thank you. Welcome, new haters. They're basically commenting on some of my TikToks like research should not be for profit. People like Dan are getting rich.
well,
Um,
and
so you can take it to that extreme, basically.
that's essentially what I just said. If you want it to be what's the word I'm looking for? Just pristine. If you want the research to be pristine, then it has to be not for profit. But the problem is you're never going to complete your research. It's like I just said, you have to pay these people. Doctors, they want to be paid for their time,
Yeah.
and they're not, and so do patients and everybody else involved. You have to pay all of these people. So
Hmm.
the financial gain has to be there. Otherwise, it just won't be accomplished.
Well, it's the reason why private industry, despite its flaws, is still way better and much more efficient than the public sector or nonprofit. I mean, we could throw nonprofits into the same category because they basically run politics to get their funding. Like it's no different
Yeah.
than politics.
But
I mean, they
nonprofits are
rely on
not
donations.
sure, but nonprofits are not truly nonprofit. At least
Right. But
not in my opinion.
but people who are like criticizing private side, and they're like, oh, people like Dan are getting rich. By the way, I'm not getting rich. Like, I wish we were getting rich. We're not getting rich. We're doing well, but we're not getting rich.
Sure.
There's people like in all kinds of industries just making money hand over fist. Doesn't
Yeah.
necessarily mean that they're doing bad things either.
So
Um,
what's the solution to these people on TikTok that are criticizing you? What's their solution?
well, they're
Uh,
pushing for like everything government controlled is
oh
their
yeah,
solution.
and that's not corrupt.
Exactly. You're just
right.
exchanging one form of you're
Matter of fact,
exchanging one set of problems for another, and it's worse because you're removing like access to real world patients.
not only that, but it's worse because you're now granting power to already a very powerful industry, government,
Yep.
right? So
Mm,
there is no oversight now whatsoever. At least there's oversight of these individual privately owned by the FDA,
yeah.
right? So there is some oversight there. What happens to that oversight if you have Nancy Pelosi running everything, who's
Yes.
already who's already you got to follow her to know what to invest in stock market wise? Like that isn't corrupt.
Yeah. She decides what bills are put before the Senate, and then her husband, sometimes days before or same day, trades on those
Yeah.
companies that are set to benefit off the news.
Yes.
Like they don't even need the outcomes; they just need the news to get
Yep.
the bump in their share price.
Yep.
So you're just
So
exchanging like
no,
one
it's
form of
worse.
fraud for another.
It's much worse if you have government doing it. Much worse.
Yeah, but for some reason, people are okay with that. Well, at least people of this line of thinking, and it's not the majority of people are not criticizing me on TikTok, but I do get more haters on there that
So
are left leaning, and this is like their solution is we should just make research like just academic medical centers and public institutions.
so that would be one solution, academic research centers, but it wouldn't necessarily have to just be academic. It could be, individually, privately owned centers, but your contractual arrangement with them would be the same as an academic unit, in which you pay them regardless of their performance, right? You sign them
Right.
to a 10-year contract,
Grants.
right? You sign them to a 10-year contract, say, okay, we're going to work with your site for 10 years. You're getting paid X dollars per year, regardless of the number of patients you enroll, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. You enroll 10 or you enroll 1,000, you're getting paid the same.
So then you can see quickly there's no incentives. People work off of incentives, and sometimes the incentive people are driven a little too far,
Yep.
unhealthy levels by incentives, like we see here, and like we hear every now and then. About 2 years ago, I did a story on the site owner in Seattle who got addicted to opioids and did this too. And he
Mm-hmm.
did it not just to get the money, but to get the study drug for himself.
Yeah.
Like he was enrolling himself. He's in jail, some guy named Samir something.
I think I remember that.
Yeah.
But
So
my point was that's how you make the data pristine, right? There's no, you have to remove incentive. So you sign
yeah,
sites, you get paid this regardless of the work you do. But guess what? They're not going to do anything. I mean, they got 10 years worth of money to do nothing.
and I get that argument. Like it's public health. This is for all of us, like for the benefit of society. But I think private industry is the most efficient, and it's proven. Like if that were the case, you'd have to remove CROs. There would be no CROs. The government would have to make their own CRO. They're
Mm.
already inefficient enough as it is. Can you imagine like the NIH starting a CRO? You're not gonna get anything done ever.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
you got to think these things through sometimes, guys. But anyways, we don't want to spend too much time on this. But this is the first time I actually like see coordinators doing jail time. And it doesn't sound like the two coordinators first mentioned. It sounds like they're the whistleblowers because they got caught and the feds went to them first and said, "Look, we're going to give you lesser sentences if you start naming names." And those two, that's what they did. Um, so you're not off the hook, guys. Don't commit fraud. Don't do foolish things. Do follow the protocol. Put the right patients in. I know it's hard sometimes with these
Put,
IE criteria.
put real patients in.
Yeah, let's start with just actually enroll people.
Yeah, real people.
Yeah, let's start with that. I mean,
Good starting point.
yeah, I think that's a general rule of thumb. Um, anything else?
No, I just for those that
Take home
complain to you,
message.
for those that complain to you on TikTok, it'll never be perfect. Nothing, no system, regardless, will ever be perfect. None. So you
Yeah,
just
well, I don't know. It's falling on deaf ears. But what about for the sites? Like practical advice to the sites, like don't cut corners.
yeah, so Dan and I service 80 clients or more throughout the United States, and occasionally I have this conversation. with a client who starts asking very odd questions like, "Hey, is this ethical? Can we do this?" It's like, listen, I'm not your authority, but I'm just going to tell you need to enroll real patients, right? I
They
mean,
would ask you this, like, can we enroll?
eh,
Wow.
not directly, but yes, kind of. I've been asked this.
But you weren't like directly asked. It's just they're alluding to like they're thinking of doing something. Then you're like, dude,
Similar to this, yes.
don't even think about it. That's really dumb.
Basically,
Now
yes.
you can send them this video and say, here, watch this instead.
Yeah.
And if you want to join, let's put them out there.
It's just when you get
Anna Rico. If these are employees like Anna Rico and Daylin Diaz, I mean, they're in a tough situation, man. Because if you're an employee and
and your PI's telling you to do
your PI is
this.
telling you, saying, "Look, I'm gonna pay you," and maybe that PI like treats you well too. You're like, you start building a bond. You're
Yep.
like, all right, and that slippery slope, your favorite term, slippery slope, just keeps getting
Mhm.
slipperier. Uh, I
Yep.
don't know, but it just shows you that everybody's responsible. It's not just the owners. Like, just use your common sense. I think this can be avoided by just using common sense. Like, the first time somebody asks you to send blood of a patient that doesn't exist might be a good time to find a new job.
But a lot of people don't think things through entirely, and these coordinators may be thinking, well, this falls on the PI anyhow. FDA gets involved, it falls on them anyhow. They're not thinking in terms of, hey, we're committing fraud, like legit fraud,
Yeah.
and this could carry criminal weight, and that's something entirely different.
And at the end of the day, besides the fact that I'm a YouTuber and I need clickbait, this is a warning, a word of warning. Like, I think this may help somebody who's on the fence and say,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, it's one thing for your PI to say, "Hey, this patient's 2 pounds overweight.
Hmm.
Let's make up their weight a little bit here. Let's take 5 pounds off." Not right, but you know what? It's fraud still too. But it's not going to get the DOJ involved, right?
No,
Whereas
that's
something
not.
like,
Yeah.
I
DOJ
mean,
is not wasting time with that. That's more of a sponsor issue. Like, hey, what's your policy for weight? Was it
yeah,
consistent? Is
yeah.
your equipment calibrated?
Well, not
Um,
only that, but usually most sponsors are fine, at least in my experience. Most sponsors are fine if the PI says, "Well, we're gonna go ahead and take the deviation here and I'll enroll
yeah.
this patient anyhow
Or we'll
at
use
that
the
weight level."
like we weighed the patient at 2 times prior to screening. Maybe they had 2 different visits. We're going to use the lower weight to get them in. Like,
Right.
that's okay. That's, you can argue, and we're not here to argue that whether it's fraud or not.
But what
It's
I'm saying is
questionable at best, but it's
DOJ.
not
That's an FDA issue, not a
exactly,
DOJ issue.
exactly. That's not a going to jail issue.
Yep.
This is a going to jail issue when you say there's patients in your study and they're actually not, and the blood's coming from somewhere.
Yep.
God knows where that blood's coming from.
Yep.
Unreal. Chris, we had to do it, man. Thank you. Everybody, let us know your thoughts on this. And you know what? Let's end it with this. If this was discovered first by a CRA, we need to congratulate them. Like, I know they might feel bad because it might be like a little awkward for that CRA. Maybe when you're a CRA, you do build a rapport with your coordinators. Um, but if this is an example of like a CRA doing their job, they should be commended publicly, um, because it could have just as easily been missed, and this could have kept going on.
Yep. Absolutely.
So shout out to the CRA if that's the case. They don't say details. The DOJ could care less. Wow.
No, they certainly could care less.
But I would follow this with more interest than the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard saga.
Yeah, I know nothing about that other than what my wife told me.
Yeah, me either. Well, anyways, like, subscribe, comment, share. Thank you so much. Thank you, Chris. Bye bye.
Mm-hmm. Bye bye.